Presented by The Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com, source for sports Surrey. This is the #1 podcast directed to goaltending. InGoal Magazine, InGoal Radio, the podcast is on the air with Darren Millard, Kevin Woodley, and David Hutchison. Today, I want to tell you right off the bat, we have a fantastic discussion with Andrew Raycroft, and people gather around the computer or your headphones, and parents, make sure that kids of all positions listen to this interview because he has some great advice for everybody, not just goaltenders. And in particular, he gets specific about the challenges of being a young person in the National Hockey League when you're just cutting your teeth. You think it's all glory? Yeah, there's some things that just make it a little more challenging. Let's bring in the co-founders of InGoal Magazine, Hutch and Woody. And along with Raycroft, we have the gear segment. We're going to head out to CCM and Adam Gans, the director of innovation at CCM Hockey. He's going to tell us all about the eFlex 4 stick that's been out for a while. I had another chance to use a pattern of a pro goaltender. Don't want to tip my hand yet, but pro goaltender the other day. I can't believe how much better I shoot the puck. Like it is scary how much that stick makes a difference. And I admit, when that stick launched and Woody came back and said he was blown away by it, I thought, how much difference can it make? I'm sold.
It was an eFlex 4, wasn't it?
The stick.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So this is funny, guys, because my column for NHL.com, the Unmasked weekly column that I write last week, was about composite sticks, right? And one of the things we're going to talk about with Adam Gans about in this gear segment is where it's going. Like, where are we headed with this? And talking to goalies around the league about this trend, and are we going to get sticks as dialed in? We've seen it with CCM with the eFlex 4 having a little bit more of an easy flex, right through the paddle, so you can sort of snap quick shots off the ice. I was talking to Jordan Binnington this week, and he liked the idea. It's funny, I mentioned the idea that we got last year from Alex Stalock about having an empty net stick, because for Binnington, it's more like shuffleboard. Like he likes it a little stiffer and just, he says the stick and the curve he has isn't really good for raising. It's just for quick passes, but he likes the concept of switching it. So I'm fascinated to see where this discussion goes. It's good to hear that, Darren, that you felt the difference in that stick in terms of passing. Did you guys know that 2 years ago, half the NHL goalies were still using a foam core wood stick? And as of the start of this season, there are only 5 left. Can you name them?
Marc-Andre Fleury.
That's one. He's the last guy in CCM.
Okay, last guy in CCM.
Hutch, you're going to have to produce this with some Jeopardy music at this point.
Oh, totally.
Do, 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 do,
Anderson.
Do, do. No.
Well, there's 2 of them. There has to be one of them. One of them has to use it.
No, but I did mention the name of one of them already. I'll give you Alex Stalock.
Okay. So there's 2.
There's 2 other guys that are on the same team. One of them they both actually have really old school soft pads that they wear.
Jonathan Quick?
No, Darren got it. Jonathan Quick and Jack Campbell. Jack Campbell, yep.
I'm taking 2 for that, so I have 3 of the 5 right now.
Oh, Darren, you win. I only thought there was 1 anyway, so.
You only thought there was 1?
Yep. I thought we were down to
because
1.
there's 1 left in CCM in Marc-Andre.
Yep.
Technically, you're right there.
Well.
And who's the 5th one? Bobrovsky?
No, Bob switched last year. He switched.
He was late with it.
Yeah, and of course we know he used the white stick because Warrior stopped using the factory. I think it was the Heritage Factory in Canada, so he couldn't get it. Mm-hmm. And then he got a Vaughn one, and Vaughn hadn't paid the rights fee, so he just used a white stick. But he switched to a CCM eFlex 4. We talked about that with him last week, and I'll have that up at ingoalmag.com as part of a review later this week. So Alex Stalock, Jonathan Quick, Jack Campbell, Marc-Andre Fleury, and the last holdout, Brian Elliott of the Philadelphia Flyers.
Of course.
Who told me...
Why would that be of course?
But just because I am an old man with a bad brain, and I think Kevin told me this one about a week ago, so...
But Els is still in a model that Warrior was making in the Finnish factory, which they of course closed this summer. So Elliot he told me he had the Flyers just load up so he's got enough twigs for the whole year. I asked him because that's the other thing. Supply, as Adam Gans talks about, there's fewer sticks being made, which means it's harder to pick out the good wood for the pros because you're not seeing as much volume as everyone at every age switches over to composite. So the quality of the foam cores in the wood is harder to get the level that NHL guys are used to. So I asked Brian, like, what's going to happen? Like, you might not even have the option. I loved his line. He's like, maybe I'll just have to go to Canadian Tire and see what they got left.
Wow. Why doesn't he switch though?
I can tell you exactly. At the end of the day, he's tried a bunch of them. And he even said, like, they get better and they get better. But he actually loves the soft feel and the flex. You talked about the flex of eFlex 4. Like, as much as we talk about CCM and eFlex 4, and we'll talk with Adam Gans about it, that flex and the concept of building those options into a composite stick, like that's new, right? Like that hasn't been around a lot. Bauer had a little bit of it with their 2S Pro stick. That I found had a little more of that flex in the paddle. But those were sort of trends in sticks that we were just starting to see in foam core, varying flexes, dialed in things for specific needs. And so that's kind of new. And guys are slow. At the end of the day, they like to feel like Elliot said, like every time a puck hits, a low shot hits the stick, there's like the wood's probably breaking a little bit and coming apart, but he likes that softness that it actually absorbs the puck, even if it means it's probably actually breaking a little bit. And he's not ready to give that up yet.
Have you guys ever heard of people getting tendonitis or tennis elbow using composite sticks, goaltenders? A therapist actually threw that at me a while ago, and I didn't get it, but I understand because of the vibration and taking shot after shot after shot after shot in practice, and the less absorption from a stick. It's a theory. So I just wondered whether you guys had ever heard that.
Well, I haven't heard it and we haven't seen it yet. I mean, and as much as the trend towards almost everybody being in composite is new, like I said, half the league 2 years ago, now just 5 guys left. I mean, they've been around since like 2006, 2007. Like Bauer led the charge here, right? I remember Cam Ward in 2007 after he won the cup switching over to their composite. Yeah. So guys have been in there. I have
one of his sticks from that era.
Yeah, so the guys have been in them a long time, and I've never heard that, to be honest with you. And I think that's a perfect chance to throw to Adam Gans, because as he explains to us in our interview, Darren, the materials and their ability as a materials engineer like himself to sort of dial in the properties and mimic that feel and get rid of that vibration. Like they're getting pretty close. Henrik Lundqvist, he was the last guy in Bauer who went from wood and a foam core model last season to a full composite. Now he's completely switched over. So I think their ability, and that was the vapor stick that we talked about in our review, again, mimics that feel of foam core. Is it the exact same? No. Is there an adjustment period? Yes. But they're getting pretty close to what it felt like before.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to chat with Jake Allen in just a little bit, and just a conversation that with information that you've not heard before, because if Kevin Woodley hasn't heard about something like this, and David Hutchison, then you haven't either. Just a different way to approach things. And Andrew Raycroft is also coming up. But let's audible over to Adam Gans talking about the eFlex 4 stick and all the technology that goes into that. The old chicken and egg theory comes up. Adam Gans is the Director of Innovation at CCM Hockey. Our gear segment presented by Source for Sports, Surrey, the Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com.
All right, welcome to the gear segment here on InGoal Radio, the podcast. We're going to do things a little different today. We're giving Cam from the Hockey Shop a week off, and we're going to go to Montreal instead. Special guest, Adam Gans, who is the Director of Innovation with CCM Hockey, former Business Director of Sticks for CCM Hockey. We're going to talk sticks, composite technology with Adam, who has a Bachelor of Engineering, Mechanical Engineering and Composites from McGill University, played some hockey at McGill University. I want to start, Adam, by when you're going to school, is a job and life in the hockey industry anything you had in mind? Or walk us through how you got to here.
It was, I think at that point, it definitely was. It was an interesting one as I was a goalie when I played. And probably one of the first things that got me interested in composite materials was actually figuring out how to make my own goalie mask at some point. And from there, and after doing all these little sketches and things like that, we ended up just in the industry almost by accident. So we were fortunate that being based where we are, and I'd say one of our competitors is also based in the area as well. And so through that, I ended up doing a student project. It was supposed to be a year, and then suddenly it became 19 years, and just there. And now it's been almost, let's say, 24 years in the industry. So it's been pretty lucky. So basically the way it all kind of played out was, we did this project on the impact of goalie sticks. And at the time, we were starting to look at the possibility of making goalie sticks out of composites and looking at how they behaved when they took impacts. And I guess they were happy with what we did. And it was graduation was one day, and my first day in the industry was the next day, and been in the industry ever since.
And that's around 2003, and here we are, 2019. So that's
I'm a little bit older than that. That was actually 1997, actually.
Nice. See, I'm not so good at the math here. I was like, that wasn't adding up to me. So this is we're gonna leave the math to the engineer and the smart people from now on. But the fact you were a goalie, the fact you're a goalie, and composite sticks, we've seen them. I mean, compared to players, a little slower to be adopted. Now everyone's using them right up to the NHL level. It's actually hard to find guys that aren't in a composite. Mm-hmm. But you've been on the leading edge of this. What was the challenge to get widespread adoption? What made goalie sticks different as a goalie yourself compared to, say, working with players and what we saw, a much broader, earlier adoption of composites?
There are a number of factors involved in that. I mean, I think one thing was just like the performance benefits for the player just came a lot earlier, just based on the way that the carbon fiber would respond, what guys could achieve, and also the weight influence that you could get. And also, I think the other thing too is that players tend to focus first on sticks, then on skates, and then everything else comes through, where goalies, I'd say, tend to focus on other things. So that was part of the slow entry. And I think the other part too was just because it took a little bit of extra effort, knowing the way the goalie stick is designed and performed, or the way it's built. It took a little bit more time to find the right ways of exploiting the properties of carbon fiber in a goalie stick.
I'm curious about those properties and the process of innovation. Sort of maybe a chicken and egg question. Does it start with, this is what we'd like the stick to do, and now can we find some materials? Or do you discover new materials and then think, how am I going to take advantage of that in technology with sticks?
I think as a starting point, I generally believe that to get truly good innovation, you really have to understand what you're trying to do and what the application is. And so a lot of it just starts from the research. And for me, I think it was an advantage having been a goaltender, and then just looking at how you use the product and that. I mean, obviously the role of the goalie has changed a lot, the way it's played, the size of the goalies as well, the stick handling that's going on right now. So it's kind of like this moving target. But when you are doing that development, the starting point is okay, what are we trying to achieve? And then from there, it's picking the right materials that work for the product. And so in the case of like the Flex 4 goalie stick, the one we're going to talk about today, so some of it is, getting after things like carbon fiber, which have very good mechanical properties, are very strong. But also one of the things too is, as much as, carbon fiber is very good in some ways, it also tends to resonate a lot when you get an impact. So you end up bringing in other materials like an Negra, which is on that eFlex 4 goal stick, which is a dampening material that also happens to be very tough and very good in impact. And so it's all about starting with, okay, what do I actually want to achieve with this product? And then from there, start the design of the shape, the choice of materials, and then working it down through there. And, another place where we're obviously fortunate that, being at CCM is we've got access to, some of the best goalies in the world. And obviously getting their insights at the onset when you're starting and when you're establishing like what your objectives are, what you're trying to achieve with the product is great. But also having there also at the end of the development cycle where you're actually validating the product. Does this do what we wanted it to do? That certainly helps as well.
I wanted to ask a little bit, what is that feedback cycle? How much of it is lab and how much of it is real world? You talked about it there. Where does, in terms of the real world and getting feedback from the best in the game, where does the lab fit in in this process? Because we've been lucky enough to be in there and seen the facilities you have. How much work goes on there in terms of validating new materials and new designs and making sure it is going to do what you want.
I'd say it's absolutely integral in terms of what we do. We always say the whole process begins and ends with the player. And so from there, like we can get after the initial research through 3 different means. Like we've got a fantastic lab here where we can, we've got cannons and things like that. And, 3-point bend tests where we can measure strength and stiffness and things like that. We also have the performance lab, which is unlike anything else in the industry, where we've got this massive lab, a synthetic ice system, a full motion capture system, almost like you have when you develop video games. It's something like that where you put markers all over the players and you can measure all sorts of things in terms of, the biomechanics of the player when they're going through any motion. But you can also even look at, puck trajectory, like how does it bounce off of a pad or how does it bounce off of a stick paddle, things like that. And so we get all sorts of insight using kind of those 3 areas, the player, the performance lab and the actual physical lab. And then from there, you start down that path of, establishing, what are the things you want to get after, certain things like if it's strength or like, how fast does it bounce off of a paddle? These are things that we can measure quite easily with the labs. On the other hand, things like feel, those are kind of things where, the best way to evaluate things like that is to give it to goaltenders and get their sense of how it performs, how it feels, which is an important part of the performance of the product.
Those things match often. Like I would think how it bounces off a paddle probably correlates to feel in terms of what you talked about getting that, trying to achieve that feel in a composite stick, which to me would probably be one of the early challenges of getting buy-in from pro level guys on composite sticks was to sort of try and mimic as much of the feel as you could. And then to take that further, you talked about Integra and its properties. We've gone from trying to achieve feel now with eFlex 4, achieving options in flex and personal preference in flex between your lines. Can you talk about how materials have allowed you to do more than just try and get feel now? Now we're seeing a whole evolution of goalie sticks in terms of how they perform.
Yeah, definitely. No, and we could talk a little bit about that. I mean, one of the things that was interesting is the development of this product. It was interesting going in to talk about the eFlex 4 because, being a 2019 product, we kind of had to go back through the old notes and everything like that. Right now, quite focused on 2021 and 2022. So it was kind of like, oh, what was I doing 2 years ago? Type discussion. But at the time, it was interesting because, we had, you go back 2-3 years ago, we had quite a few of our NHL players were still in foam core goal sticks. And so that was kind of a starting point. And especially when we start off this project, we're focused on, evolving that player who's really looking for feel and understanding that the foam core goal sticks, which are made of like a high density polyurethane foam, have very good dampening properties. One of the starting points was okay, well, how can we create that same kind of feel where you're not getting that loud sound, but also not getting all those vibrations in your hand? And one of the best materials for that is Integra. It's a high modulus polypropylene material that actually has a very slow speed of sound. So when things are hit, it dampens out a lot of the vibration before it gets to your hand. And so it's quite good for that. And the other place where it's actually quite effective also is along edges and places like that. It's the ballistic material that's very good impact. It's been used in goalie sticks, and it's also been used even in like front wings of Formula One cars. They're trying to protect the carbon fiber in very much the same way, just with much larger budgets, and it's good for that as well. And then you asked the question also about performance. It's definitely something where we're seeing change. Traditionally, a lot of the composite goalie sticks have been relatively stiff versus a foam core, even a wood goalie stick. So one of the things we went off to do is to have a softer paddle, which allows the players to load it up a little bit more. And where that's actually becoming particularly advantageous right now is we're seeing guys, for the most part, or as a starting point, they start to their stick handling more and more. We're also seeing a trend among some of the guys where they're actually cutting the handles shorter. So as you decrease the length of that beam, you're making it stiffer and stiffer. So the fact that we're able to develop a softer flex is proving to be particularly advantageous for guys like that use that, say, a little bit shorter stick to allow them to do the stick handling.
Can we just open a window up here? Because I was having a conversation with a coach yesterday who told me that a retailer pretty major retailer, not the one we're working with on this podcast, is telling kids they can't be cutting down their goalie sticks, sort of an old myth that's been sticking around in the industry for a while. So what's your position on that?
Well, I mean, it has its advantages and disadvantages. I mean, it's like a lot of things when you choose your product, you're looking, for, to, maximize a certain part of your game. And so definitely the thing we're seeing right now is, stick handling has become so important for the goalies. And so where in the past, like a lot of the goalie coaches would be like, oh, you need your full length of handle so you can poke check. Let's say today poke checking is less and less relevant. Mm-hmm. And I would say the stick handling, has become so important, especially watching the overtime games now. When you get a 3-on-3 situation, the ability of the goalie to stick handle is super important. I should say one of the other guys actually from out west that we've worked with on the project was Eli Wilson. He's a fantastic goalie coach who actually runs stick handling clinics. And like as an old goalie, it's a little bit shocking to hear about goalie schools where you do nothing but stick handling, but that's the game today, and it's become so important. And so from that standpoint, I understand the benefit of cutting it down. It does have a disadvantage of in terms of reach. It will decrease your reach. It'll also change the balance of the goalie stick as well. So if you have less material above your hand, it's your stick will feel a little bit more like a hammer. But unfortunately, like with the sticks we've got coming out now, they're so well balanced that you're not really losing that much from a balance standpoint, and there are gains to be had as well. But it's one of those things. It's going to be dictated by the height of the player, the length of his arms, and how he does the stick handles.
We've seen it. Where's the future? Because we've seen it with players. We see it now. Like, to me, eFlex 4 was a major evolution because it gave you two distinct lines, one stiffer and one with more flex through the paddle. And from a puck handling perspective, speaking personally, my beer league team would prefer it if I just stayed in the net, frankly. But now that I've tried the eFlex 4, I think that I'm Marty Turco out there because I feel like I can snap it. It's just so much easier to get that little quick flex, and it comes off there a lot hotter, and you just feel good about it. So you've got these two distinct products. What's the future? Do we get into more customizable options? Will we ever see, do you think there are goalies at the NHL as they get more and more skilled puck handling that are going to start looking for, like we see on the player side, like custom flex, different kick points? Like, is that possibly a future of sticks, or am I being too ambitious in that regard?
No, I don't think you're being ambitious at all. I think we actually already get a lot of insight from our pro athletes about little features and little things they're looking for. Kick point is definitely something we discuss with the pro players, and I think is part of the future. And also curvatures, you have to think that they're going to start to change a little bit as guys, focus more and more on the stick handling and go to stick handling camps and things like that. As that becomes more and more kind of critical to a goaltender being able to play at a higher level, then it's without doubt that we're going to be looking at developing patterns and things like that, and kick points that help in terms of the shooting, in terms of the stick handling. Obviously, too, the fact that they're so much lighter. I played at a time when a 850-gram goalie stick was considered a light goalie stick, and then you didn't want to pick up the heavier ones. And now, we're down in the mid 600s. So that too is allows you to stick handle in ways you couldn't in the past. And I imagine some of these trends are going to continue, but definitely like the coaching and the way the game is changing to such a quick game are definitely going to influence how that product evolves.
We've got obviously a very educated audience who's going to be familiar with a lot of this, but I think it's also fair to say there's a lot of parents and kids listening in. What can you tell us? What can you recommend in your line for the younger goaltender, for the parents who want to outfit their kid who's 10 years old or younger or something? It would seem to me the eFlex line is what fits best because it's a little bit more flexible. But what's going on for the youngsters? I
think the main thing is with the youngsters to make sure that he's in his position with his skates on, and from there look at his hand position. Something that's I think has always been really important is getting the proper lie and getting the proper paddle height at that age. That balance of the goaltender is so critical, that having the right paddle height so your hands are in the right position. So then everything comes together is super important. So I think that would be the starting point. It's one of the things it's actually interesting with the evolution of the goal sticks, where, I recall a couple of years ago talking to some pro goalies, and they talk about how the goal stick was almost like a form of ballast, where being heavy would actually forward and get you more on your toes, and then as they reduced in weight, you actually had to change things around a bit. And but it just goes to show the importance of being well balanced in the appropriate position. And so that's where it's key. I mean, that things like that are important from day one. And so I think for me, the first thing to look at is just make sure the kid has the right size, the right size paddle height and lie, so that he's sitting in a comfortable position where his weight is distributed in the right areas.
We've talked about eFlex 4, stick we like here that we're testing. Got a review coming up soon. We talked about that Flex. Can you walk us through the process of just developing it and coming up with something that really was completely different in terms of an alternative line for CCM and the composite goalie stick department?
Well, I think, going through the goal stick, you asked earlier about like the development process and everything. And that's something that I'm glad you've had a positive experience with that, the eFlex 4 stick. I mean, a lot went into that, and it was a neat opportunity in the sense that we were able to start from scratch on that product. And so when you look at it compared to previous versions, there are a lot of little nuances, like whether it's like the thinner heel, just allow you to get up, under the puck a little bit more. It's a thinner blade. So by making it thinner, you can use certain materials that you couldn't use otherwise. And it gives certain dampening characteristics that you wouldn't have if it was a thicker structure. And even little things too, you look at the handle, which has got a rounder profile, which for anyone in the composites world, that as you round out the corners, you naturally get a better impact resistance. And so it's like all these little nuances within the product. There are a lot of little things that make big differences on that product.
I wanted to ask you about that, actually. I had almost forgotten about the rounded handle on that. What was the testing? Was that something that the idea you had and then the testing validated it? Because we've noticed it as well. It makes a lot of sense in terms of, durability is a question we get a lot about all composite sticks. It is a bigger investment for parents for their kids. And yet, unlike a foam core, it's not going to soften up and break down over time. The only question is, how is it for puck resistance? And you guys have done a lot of work to make sure that it is going to last longer. Walk me through that process of how you came to the idea of rounding off that handle.
Well, it's just, I guess the starting point was just it's a basic principle of the composite materials, which is, the more you're forcing into tight corners, the more you're actually just kinking the fiber. And if you just take a piece of paper and fold it and make a hard kink, you'll see where it gets weaker. And it's the same kind of thing here. And so as you round it out, you're stressing the material a little bit less. It makes it easier to mold, so for better consistency. But also as it's taking impacts, you're less likely to have an impact that hits directly on a kinked area of the fiber where it could potentially be weak. And so I think we've actually got a really nice compromise in terms of what we do, which is it's round, and we've actually seen in the lab that through the profile and the materials we chose to use, we've got a nice uptick in mechanical properties or impact resistance. But at the same time, it's still a hockey stick. It's still a playable structure that doesn't feel awkward in the hands. And it's something too that we only did like well above your grip area. So the grip area is untouched. There you need a little bit of squareness to the profile so that the stick doesn't rotate in your hands. So we actually kind of profile it up. But in the areas that you frequently get those impacts, we round it out and use the right materials to get that higher impact strength.
That's awesome. Okay. Listen, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It's funny, composite sticks are, like I said, they're everywhere in the NHL right now. They're everywhere in minor hockey. I don't know that anybody's ever really thought to look at just how in depth you have to get to come up with these ideas. So it's fascinating to hear your background and the fact you're a goalie and the evolution and the role you've played in this evolution with CCM hockey there. It's pretty cool. And thank you very much for sharing sort of some windows and some insights into that with our audience.
Thank you very much. And I look forward to showing you the lab next time you're in town.
Perfect. We'll take you up on that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
The one part that you guys talked about during that interview, Woody, and Hutch, I don't know whether this impacts you or not, because there's two parts of where I'm going to go with this, is where you grip the stick is still square, but the handle is actually rounded on the edges, and that's to protect against and guard against breakage, right?
On the E-Flex forestick,
the E-Flex forestick.
The shaft of it has been rounded off, as he talked about, and honestly, that was the one thing, especially early in composites, like they're more durable overall than a foam core. I think that's a fair statement, because I know this is tough for parents making the investment. They're more durable. They don't soften up like wood and foam core did on the ice, and like as Brian Elliott told us, with those low shots. But you get to a certain age, guys are shooting hard enough. If you're a beer leaguer or playing against decent players, like the reality is a good enough shot on one spot in the shaft can end that composite right there and then, and you're out, pretty good chunk of change. That's something that I think they've done a much better job blending the materials, using materials that are a lot more durable. And in CCM's case, makes sense, as Adam explained, round the edges of the shaft so that there's no square edge, right, which is more susceptible.
I was wondering why they didn't round the edges all the way down, because it's more comfortable to hold. Except when Adam, as I'm thinking about this, he answers it because of stick rotation, which I never would have thought of. Like if it's not square, if it's rounded, it just leads that little percentage of rotation on a shot or a scramble or whatever that may twist that stick. So I thought that was a really interesting way to bring you inside what they're thinking when they design something like this.
Yeah, and it's that's why they have engineers and smart guys like him going through it, right? Like it's been kind of cool. Me and Hutch got to see it with CCM, and the amount of innovation and the amount, Adam, now the director of innovation, the amount of sort of brain power behind some of this stuff, but with a hockey background, right? So I thought it was, appreciate his time. We're going to try and do this a little more in the gear segment, still presented by the Hockey Shop and thehockeyshop.com. But, we got to give Cam a break every once in a while. People are asking for him when they go into the store. He needs a little extra time to meet with his fans. We need to keep the ego a little bit in check. So we're going to go out and about and talk to some of the different people from CCM, from Bauer, from Brian's about the new products. And hopefully our audience likes mixing it in.
While you're bringing up Cam and people being able to see him, Kevin, we published the overview of the new Brian's Optic 2 at ingoalmag.com this week. And if anybody wants to see Cam sliding around on the ice, do suggest you go check out that review, because there's a nice little video clip of Cam working his magic on the ice.
Yeah, Cam did double duty for us last week. Had a little ice time issue myself where I couldn't be the demo goalie. Let's be honest, nobody wants to see me sliding around like an old man on the ice. Usually,
Darren and I do.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Hutch likes that, because when it ends up in an accidental and ugly butter stack, he likes to capture it and share it. I thought Cam was a good sport, did a good job highlighting it, and we've said it before, guys. This is why we go to the Hockey Shop. This is why you should go to the Hockey Shop, source for sports in Surrey, or thehockeyshop.com, because of people like Cam and his staff, because they are out there at 7:00 in the morning to play 3-on-3 before his shift at the Hockey Shop starts. And that gives him an opportunity, in this case, to be out there on the ice in the new Optic 2. We talked about the CCM lines, the Premier 2-stick with a stiffer flex profile through the paddle, the E-Flex 4-stick with more flex and some of the newer features, including that tapered shaft. You can find all that, plus all the latest models from Warrior, from Bauer in the goal stick department. All the latest gear from all the brands at the best prices at the Hockey Shop, source for sports in Surrey, and thehockeyshop.com. And if you missed him on the podcast this week, make sure you stop in and say hi to Cam in person when you're there to pick up your newest gear.
He'll let you print off the color photo for the 8x10 in the office.
And he'll sign it? Will he sign it?
Yep. Yeah. It's an extra $5 to have him personalize it, though.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. Nice. Hey, I have a question. The next time we do the talking to Adam, how many different curves do you think they actually make right now?
It's interesting that you bring up curves. I don't have the answer for that, although I should. Kevin's way better than me. But one thing we have been talking to them about is typically when a company wants us to have a look at a stick and give a feel for it, we're only getting one particular curve. So I think won't be long before we're able to do a bit of an assessment of the different curve options in one single line. Because obviously everybody has different preferences. So
we all have different preferences, but
Yep.
how many options or choices do you think we actually have? Is it
cue the Jeopardy music again here as Kevin's looking up the real answer?
Heel curve, toe curve. We hear all those things, but is there 3, 4, 5 different heel curves? Is there a mid-range, 3 or 4 different versions of that? Because composite sticks, look the Sakic curve, the Sakic pattern that everybody's used for so many years as on the skaters. I mean, Sakic didn't even use that pattern. He's admitted that, but it's so popular. But we're used to those kinds of things: the coffee, the Sakic, the Gretzky, the Eisenman. Those patterns were really popular. But when it comes to goal stick curves, how many different actual curves are there?
This is a brilliant segue, Darren. Not to the information I'm going to give you now, but to check out ingoalmag.com for the eFlex 4 review that we have coming up later this week, which will include a list of the customizable options you can achieve when ordering a pack of 3, including custom grips. We talk about grips, man. You want to talk about a guy that grips it low. Look at
that was my next thing.
But you can get some of them. I don't know that, like we've seen, like we saw with Bauer, we saw the Henrik Lundqvist Pro returns at the hockey shop, and they sold out in a hurry because people like that unique grip. With CCM, you can get different sort of handles at the top of the paddle. Bobrovsky, one of the reasons he really liked the CCM stick is they made he's got a really narrow down paddle, and they built him that.
On
so
the
his model,
side, right?
His comes like that, sort of grips it really low. So, obviously there's a ton at Pro. There's a ton of different ones. What you can get publicly, to be honest with you, I think, it's not as deep. The list of options isn't as deep publicly, outside of going Pro return.
I wouldn't expect it to be.
No, I mean, it never is. It's like masks, right? Like for the longest time, there were, I think at one point, I remember the old iTech, there was like someone told me there were like 16 different patterns, and amongst those 16 different options, they could fit almost every head. But we never got those at retail, right? So it's a similar story, but there are options, and we'll list them completely as part of the customizer review in the CCM eFlex 4 stick this week, which ties in nicely to Adam's segment on the pod here.
Hutch, it looked like you were trying to land a plane there. You were waving.
No, I was just going to say, last one we ordered was a Bauer, and they've actually got the Vapor and the Supreme models. The Vapor has 4 different blade pattern options, and the Supreme's got 2. Don't know the reason. We need to dig that one out as well. I mean, you can thoroughly imagine a company wanting to restrict the number of SKUs they've got. It makes life a lot easier for manufacturing.
Yeah.
Well, they have to basically create a machine to create every different one in terms of mass production, right?
Yeah.
So,
hey,
do you just on the paddle? So I like not the trigger, but I certainly like having almost like a Bobrovsky, much narrower handle on the paddle, right where you grip your stick. If I cut that on a composite, how much do you think it affects the integrity of the stick, or does it?
We need to get Adam to answer that one too. But how many times have you heard that if somebody nicks a stick, you're worried it's about to snap? So.
I know. I used to do it with my wood or foam cores, and you just cut it right, and boom, boom, boom. But I haven't tried it with a composite.
I will say this: I know Sean Murray, goalie coach here locally. He promotes a sort of unique. Actually, and I owe him a story sort of outlining why, to be honest with you. It's very Lundqvist-esque, sort of squared off at the top, and the way it improves the way you hold your blocker and are able to present your blocker and the stick blade. It's actually, it's a really fascinating breakdown in the way he does it. A lot of his goalies have bought in, and I understand why, because it makes a ton of sense and they really like it. In order to achieve that in a composite, it does require cutting it, and he hasn't had any problems with it. So,
there you go.
So you can, although I'm sure the folks that run the companies, Bauer, CCM, Warrior, might be cringing as we talk about that, but
warranty's out the window.
Yeah, it's definitely voiding your warranty. But I tell you what, sounds like we've just sort of nicked the tip of the iceberg here, not to go Titanic on it. But I think there's a lot of different things
Never a good reference, by the way.
That's true. But I'm pretty sure we could probably, it sounds to me like we got some part twos coming up here. That's all I'll say.
Oh, for sure. I'll jump in with two things then. I bet as a whole bunch of people are listening to this, there's more questions that people would like to ask Adam. And there's probably more than a few of you willing to tell us that you knew the answer to how many curves there are for various companies. And lots of you are more on top of those details than we are. If you want to send us in the details or you want to send us in a question for Adam, hit us up at podcast@ingoalmag.com. So that was the first one.
Who just did that?
That's just the guy we bring in to do the voiceovers.
We just have somebody standing by to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. The other one I wanted to hop in with, guys, wasn't really part of the plan, but we're talking about things over at ingoalmag.com this week. Pete Fry is an old friend of InGoal. He's been friends of ours for many years, but he's got an article up at InGoal, and he's going to be bringing us content at least monthly as we go forward here. Yeah, Pete's a goalie mindset guy, sort of a sports psychologist type, helps you prepare mentally for being an elite goaltender. And he works with all sorts of pro and junior goaltenders. And Pete's just a fantastic guy. So he's brought an article to us this week. It's a fun little routine that he actually first suggested to my son when we were having lunch with him a couple of months ago. It's a 60-minute routine that you can go through on non-game days to help you improve your concentration. We had gone to him saying, look, Maddie's moved up to Bantam this year. We're going from shorter periods to 320s with stop time and long intermissions. And he said, well, here's something you can do to elevate your concentration game to a pro level. So there's a number of different things that you can do there. You can sign on to his online program and try some of those things as well. And I just encourage people to go have a look and have a little fun, try something new.
Might just make you so talented and so effective that you can channel your inner Tuukka Rask. Can you imagine being able to channel your inner Tuukka Rask? The Boston Bruins going so good right now. Woody, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I can't imagine actually playing behind a team that good either. So, and that is definitely a shot at my beer league team.
No,
but you know who did channel their inner Tuukka Rask? I think that was an attempt at a segue by you, and I'm tired and a little slow. No, it was a good one, Darren. I came across a story that will actually be up at NHL.com a little later this week. Last year, we talk about the roles that backup goalies play, and I think they got a tough job and an important job at times. Turns out Jake Allen contributed a little more directly to the St. Louis Blues Stanley Cup victory than maybe a lot of people knew. Jake channeled his inner Tuukka Rask and actually imitated Tuukka Rask for a video session with St. Louis Blues goaltending coach David Alexander before the Stanley Cup final. And he basically tried to present himself and move like Tuukka. And the idea was to shoot video and incorporate those visual elements into Dave Alexander's pre-series pre-scout on Tuukka Rask. And talking to some of the shooters with the Blues, they really had not just a ton, guys who have been on other teams in the playoffs. They really had a ton of praise for David Alexander's breakdowns and the way he broke down goaltenders. But they thought that having Jake there to sort of represent it visually presented the information in a way that, they maybe not all of them would be able to understand before seeing it visually. So managed to catch up with Jake a little bit in the locker room of the Blues this week. And he kind of explained to me the process a little bit. So we'll share a little bit of audio there with you guys.
Yeah, me and Dave, I talked to Dave, and obviously me and Dave have a long, it's all good. Have a good relationship. And, I think we started talking earlier in the playoffs. Really, it was more about, because each goalie they played was so different, right? Hellebuck, Bish, Jones, and Rask, right? So you're looking at 4 different guys that play complete opposite style of game, sizes, techniques, gear. So I said, why don't we try to implement something where, we can show the boys what this guy does compared to this guy, and, just ways that we can potentially score, and the optical illusion each of those guys have is different in the net. And I think that's what we're just trying to create from an understanding standpoint for the players, is that I think me and Dave both understand that the player side of the game pretty well. So I think we try to, simplify how we could beat these goalies. And sometimes, the optical illusion that they look bigger than they are in certain positions, in certain ways, and just the habits that they have in the net. We try to break it down as best as possible. And, if it caused a goal or two in playoffs, then we did our job. So we're just trying to help the guys out. Yeah, we were. No, I was trying. Were you in here, No, me and Dave would go out early, and I'd try to act like Rask. skate like Rask. I can sort of try to imitate. He does his different backwards C cuts, and just the way he holds himself and how low he looks, but his chest is forward, and it just a lot of little things that he does, and specific to his game, which this game is great, and so it was just little things that we'd go back on all the goals he let in and sort of find tendencies and try to imitate them as best as possible and just show guys, not in a long clip, but a few clips that Dave could voice over and I'd be in the net.
That's fascinating. It's like a scout goalie. The closest thing I've ever heard of in this regard, I know coaches in the past, when they've been going to face a southpaw, they have brought up, if they have a left-handed catching or a right-handed catching goaltender in the minors, they brought that goaltender up to face in practice. And I know that's happened, but that's as close. Like, not saying that that goalie A was going to be Tom Barrasso, but he just caught with the same hand. So that's what they would do. So that's fascinating that they went to that length with the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, and it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't the whole thing. It was just a part of that pre-scout presentation that David Alexander did before every series. But I thought it was fascinating too. I really enjoyed it. And the only other time I think I've seen it, guys, is the 2010 Olympics. I remember being there, covering it, and watching a USA practice before they faced Marty Brodeur in Canada in the preliminary rounds. And I remember Jonathan Quick's down at one end working, and Ryan Miller's at the and all of a sudden there's Tim Thomas with Ron Wilson at center ice, and he's making movements that Marty played different, right? Like especially as later in his career, like the separation between his style and everyone's else has got wider because he didn't conform to all the things that everyone else was doing, and it was like I remember watching it and being like, yeah, that's like he's imitating Marty right there, right before a game against Marty. And that was, and it was with coaches and some shooters and looking at tendencies. And that was the closest I'd ever seen to that. I have talked to one goalie coach that evidently asked his backup goalie to play on the goal line to imitate Mike Smith. And another goalie coach, this is way back, I guess they were facing Hasek, so they were asking a guy to roll over in the odd 2-pad stack. So it's happened before.
Pretend you're on fire. Stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah, I know. I got to talk to him.
Yeah, so it's it has happened before, but this is, like you said, this to me is never seen it quite like this. And I thought it was neat, especially if you win your first. Be
insulted too,
Really?
To be asked to do it?
Yeah.
Well, that probably speaks to, maybe in practice, but this wasn't in practice. This was be part of the video presentation. Probably speaks to the relationship that they have. And Jake mentioned that you heard in the video. Like he's got a really strong, like his relationship with Dave Alexander predates Dave being hired by the Blues. And so they have enough, faith in each other and belief in each other to have a conversation openly and have him be a part of it. I just thought it was a pretty cool story. Yeah. That I'd never heard before about the Stanley Cup final.
We've come a long way. Although that, I'm trying to think. That's not necessarily innovation. That's more common sense. And I'm kind of mad at the industry that we haven't done that or heard of that more. It does make sense that you would do something like that. Your feature interview this week is Andrew Raycroft, who burst onto the scene with the Boston Bruins, but was a world-class junior before that, and went on to the Toronto Maple Leafs and a few other teams. At one point, held the Maple Leafs record for single-season wins. And had that kind. They don't look back fondly with great fanfare of his time in Toronto, but he did. He had the single season wins record for Toronto for a number of years. So he did a lot in in a really quick time span. And just before we get into the interview, there's a couple of things to listen to here for. One, how young he was when he got to the National Hockey League. That is certainly something that that you forget about over the course of time. And his admiration for Ian Clark certainly really shines through, Woody.
Yeah, and actually, and probably why, I thought was really interesting. We think Ian gets tagged, and he's talked about it, his evolution as a goalie coach, and we had him on twice in earlier episodes, so make sure you go listen to that if you haven't already. But a guy who I think back then was probably known more for being technical. So to hear Andrew, and I'll let you, I won't give it away here, but that wasn't the element that Andrew got out of his time with Ian. It wasn't all about technique. So I thought that was really fascinating. And like I said, the whole thing to me was really fascinating. I really enjoyed it. And sometimes when we talk to guys who played before, I think people here, like young goalies, will be like, "Oh, it's not a current player. I'm not going to take anything that's going to help me in my game." You couldn't be further from the truth. Make sure you listen to this one because you will get something out of this. Will help you be a better goaltender.
He was a great junior, a Calder Trophy winning goaltender, and now is a broadcaster with NESN. Andrew Raycroft on InGoal Radio, the podcast presented by Source for Sports Surrey, The Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com.
Andrew, it's been a while. Our listeners don't know this, but you had to stop. Well, they know you had to stop here in Vancouver. What they don't know is you had to put up with me, which I think is one of the hardest parts for goaltenders when they get traded to the West Coast or when they sign in Vancouver, is having to deal with my annoying goalie questions. And you got the double whammy because I was just starting back then, learning my things from Ian Clark. And I probably gravitated towards you even more because my first set of pads was a used set of Reebok, the original RBK, in like the Bumblebee yellow and black, just like your set in Boston. So you survived here with me and you're still willing to come back on. That makes you the bravest goaltender in the world.
Yeah, extremely brave. But yeah, I certainly didn't know the extent of goaltending talk would be necessary when I got out to Vancouver. But obviously, always fun to see and talk to you about goaltending and to talk with another Reebok owner. It's always cool.
Well, okay, so that's where my passion started for goaltending, was around that time, and through Ian Clark and working with him. What about you? What age did you get started? What sparked it for you? What got you into goaltending?
Yeah, one summer I just kind of told my parents that I wanted to be a goalie. It was around 9 or 10. I played forward a couple years, and I assume, I don't really recall, but I assume it was mostly about the gear and the late 80s. Early 90s, when gear was actually becoming a little colored and masks and things like that. So that was certainly I'm sure my 10-year-old allure to goaltending and made a pretty decent life decision at that age.
Yeah, and it worked out okay, eh?
It did.
So growing up in Belleville, Ontario, as you start to become a goaltender, who were the guys you idolized? I mean, the eras have changed, right? From the age of 10, nowadays, some people might say that's late start. They'd probably have a goalie coach right away. What was it like for you growing up? How'd you learn? Who'd you emulate? Who were you cheering along on Saturday night watching TV?
Yeah, so I definitely didn't have a goalie coach at that age. Those are the good old days when kids could just play hockey, and we were on the ice a couple times a week and played lots of road hockey and pond hockey come winter. But certainly no extra training sessions for us back then. And I was a huge Canadians fan. Obviously, Patrick Waugh, that was the wheelhouse with 86 and then 93, which was the real big one. I was a huge Habs fan, and obviously being near to Toronto as well. When Felix came in 92, 93, he was extremely stylish and young and cool. And so those are the two guys I saw a lot. Again, prior to internet and seeing a lot of hockey, it was just Saturday night, and those are the games I got. But I was a massive Waugh fan, massive Canadians fan. And then, I got a little bit older and started doing the goalie schools in the summer. I had Rick St. Croix goalie school I went to quite often, numerous years. He was just down the street in Trenton. So that was an easy one for me. That was my first goalie school that I had gone to, and I always loved going there. And And then the other one I remember is Craig Billington's in London when I, probably 14, 15, when I could go up and stay the week on my own. I did that for a couple of years.
Of course, Rick St. Croix still coaching, still goalie coach with the AHL affiliate for the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose. You kind of came in kind of a sweet spot there, right? You talked about Patrick and obviously the influence we saw he had on the game, starting sort of 86 and in through 93. Like you were kind of right as the game was evolving, a lot more technical, a lot more butterfly. What was that experience like? Because there would have been guys you looked up to playing in the NHL. And I'll never forget this, starting in the NHL, even in the early 2000s for you, there were still guys in the league that got up off the quote unquote wrong leg.
Oh, no question. I mean, my first, in 2000, when I jumped right in as a 20-year-old, Byron Dafoe was the other goalie here in Boston. And he definitely, I don't think he ever got up on the right leg, throughout his entire career. So it was certainly different for him seeing a kid like me coming in. By that time, I'd been 3 years junior. So I would have met John Elkin, who was my goalie coach, kind of for life from the age of 16, 17. And, obviously we were doing, the proper leg and a lot of slides and a lot of knee action. So, doing that 3 years prior to going to the NHL and, kind of being ahead of that curve as a 20-year-old, definitely, something that the older guys noticed.
So 3 years in junior, first year pro, 2000, 2001, some time in Providence, but also, like you said, NHL at the age of 20. In a time now, here we are, almost 20 years later, and we're just now seeing teams again start to give younger goalies a shot. For the longest time, it was like, that cliche that, goalies take longer to develop. And here you are in the NHL at age 20. What was that like at age 20 being in the National Hockey League? What were the challenges, even mentally, to being on that stage 1 year removed from junior?
Yeah, it was wild. And, it was really like 4 months, finishing up in Kingston in May, April, and then being in the NHL in the start of October. So it was a shock, something I didn't expect. It was obviously injuries that allowed me to get that opportunity. And like you said, there was barely any 20-year-old players, let alone 20-year goalies at that time. Now there's a couple, but even now, it's difficult to start out that way. And, for me, right off the bat, it was all mental. That was the challenging part. It was still hockey, and the game back then wasn't quite as fast. It was a lot faster than junior, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't as east-west as it is now. And like we talked about a little bit with my style and the reason why Patrick Waugh played that style and he was the best in these guys is because, it was down the wing. It was straightforward. So you could play well if you had good technique back then. You were able to, I was always good at reading the play, and I picked that up pretty quickly. And it was, when you have better players in front of you defending, you can read the play a little easier as well. So, but mentally it was hard just because I was so much younger than everyone else. And over a 2-3 month period of living in a hotel and trying to manage that social life and fitting in and those kinds of things. That was the hardest part. To really become a pro while you're in the NHL is much different than when you're with a bunch of other younger guys in the minors at that time trying to be pros. So it was a steep learning curve, and I was able to be there 3 or 4 months right away when I was 20 and had a little bit of success. And it certainly was a big reason why I was able to develop over the next couple years in the minors. And when I was up in the NHL, I was always ready because I had those experiences when I was 20.
Yeah, I was going to say, and coming off, OHL goaltender of the year in the CHL. So obviously he's had some success, but we've heard it so often over the years, and even Carter Hart talking about it recently, junior to pro is just such a big jump. Now, you spent some time, obviously, up and down a little bit the first few seasons, playing in the NHL, but not full-time until 03-04. So, and then in 03-04 with the Bruins, Calder Trophy, NHL Rookie of the Year. How much did that back and forth of those first few years in and out of the NHL and getting that experience in the first year set you up for success when you made it full-time? Played 57 games in 03-04 and won the Calder. All those experiences build up. Were there any moments that jump out now as like welcome to the NHL moments in that season, or had you had them all by the time you became a rookie, officially a rookie season?
Yeah, no, that was the big help for me, is that I had most of those moments. I'd had the first start and the first win and the first road trip and the first time I got pulled and the first bad game I had. And so I got most of that out of the way. I had games where I would get called up I'd have to fly. I remember flying to New York, after a 3-3 on the weekend in Providence, flying to New York and playing that night, blowing into pregame skate and playing that night. So I had a lot of different experiences already in the NHL. And, I had a great, my third year, I was playing really well up top and I got injured. And then I got sent down and we lost in the first round to Manitoba, actually, Vancouver farm team at that time. We lost, but I played great. We just didn't score. I think every game was 1-0 basically. And, I was ready. I'd finally, mastered the AHL, and I just knew I was going to be ready for the NHL. I stayed in Boston all summer and trained, and so it wasn't. I expected to be a backup to Felix. I didn't expect to obviously have the season I did and play 57 games and be a leader of the team, but I certainly expected to be in the NHL that whole year. There was no shocks that year for me.
What's that dynamic like with Felix? There's a guy you talked about, one of your inspirations as a teen, one of the guys who kind of popped on the scene with all that style and all that success. What's that like all of a sudden having him as a playing partner?
No, I was the best. I was so excited when they signed him July 1st, or I'm assuming it was around that time. And like I said, I knew I was getting set up to be in the NHL. I had that feeling, and I knew I was going to be ready as long as, I played well. So to be able to learn from him and again, our styles on the ice were much different, but off the ice, just to learn, how to handle media and how to handle, expectations. And I remember extremely well one night we, even like back then, media was, like to talk to a goalie, media wasn't going to do that on a game day. And after the game, he had a TV thing to do with the local station. We ended up losing 5-1, and he probably didn't have his best night. And I remember them coming in like, hey, you don't have to go do this. And, you had a bad game, bad night. He's like, what do you mean? I mean, I agreed to do this. I'm going to go out and do it. I don't care about the game now. I'll go and talk about it. That's always stuck with me, and it stuck with me at the time. I remember sitting beside him thinking, that's pretty stand up to go out there and just own it. And he didn't, worry about the day to day. It was always a process. And so there's lots of little things I took from him, and he was just such a great supporter. Going into Montreal in the playoffs, I remember him talking to me about the playoffs and how to just manage nerves, manage emotions, and he was such a great help and just a great guy.
You played in a lot of media markets where like intense hockey markets where there's a lot of media scrutiny. Obviously, Boston, we've already talked about after the trade to Toronto, here in Vancouver. Outside of that lesson, like, do people realize how hard it is, especially as a goaltender, to be in those markets? And, when some of the questions, I've been in those scrums where they get kind of pointed directly after a loss. What's that like? How do you learn to handle those kind of things? Is that something that you think is a lesson young goalies coming into the NHL sometimes still need to learn?
Yeah, no question. And that's the one, I look back, I know I could have done it better. Over the years, I think that you just get that with age a little bit, but certainly it's it's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than people probably understand. You're not just there answering questions. There's a lot of responsibility come with those answers and just dealing with those. And it's funny, I was watching a show the other day and Steve Young talking about NFL quarterbacks. I thought it was perfect, and I wish someone had heard that in 2002. But he was talking about basically the 3-ring circus, and you have to be partners with fans, you have to be partners with the media, and you have to be partners with management and your teammates. And I thought that was great. And, it really is, you really do have to have a partnership with that media nowadays. And, I think it was more confrontational back then. I think as a goalie, I'm sure you saw this with Lou, even in 2010, there were times when it felt like everyone was against you and they were trying to get you rather than, and you had to be serious back then too, right? As a goalie, to be so serious and you're always on. You couldn't flip a puck to somebody or go have a conversation with someone in warm up because people thought you weren't ready to play. There was that stigma and that went side to side with that. You couldn't do an interview on game day because you had to be, on thinking about the game all day long. And, I think I took myself too seriously at times. I took the whole, I wish I had to just lightened up a little bit and allowed, to joke around a little bit and be okay with having a bad game and not having to feel like I had to be miserable when we lost and happy when, or still just a little bit miserable even when we won. So I think guys do a better job of that now. I think everyone's okay with the media a little bit now, but back in the day, it wasn't like that. And, I think that partnership idea is a great way to think of it.
Oh, it's funny you say that. I was going to ask you how you think about not talking on game days now that you're on the other side of the microphone working in the media. And some goalies do, some goalies don't. We hear different opinions on it from a lot of different people. But I guess I'd never thought of it, Andrew, in terms of if you were too aloof or too relaxed, that sometimes you got judged as not being serious enough, and that was a real problem back then. I like the hope that that's changed. I don't remember it being feeling like that. But maybe that's because I was learning to be a goalie too and never saw it in the same light.
Yeah, I mean, I always felt that way. I felt like I couldn't just be, you had to be on all the time, and it's just not realistic. I think it's still a game. You have fun with it, and you want to do your best and work hard. But at the same time, there's times when goalies do still get criticized whether they care enough, and I see that here in Boston with Tuukka. Up until even now, even though they went to Game 7, even now, there's still some people that think does he really want the big game? Does he really want to win? And it's crazy, right? He's a leader in everything. And to get this far, you can't have that mindset. You're not going to make it very long if you don't care. And, there was times when, I know people or felt like people didn't think I cared, but it was the most important thing in the world. And that's why sometimes I was so standoffish because it just hurt so much that I wasn't playing well at times. And, so I think, like I said, I think it's changed. The young guys are so well prepared for everything and they've already gone through, now juniors has media guys and they're on Twitter and they're dealing with this much more, podcasts like yourself, like this, they're dealing with this already. But for 05, 06, all the way till 2012, there wasn't really a crash course in that for young guys.
No, that's really interesting to hear. How much you were here in 09, 010, you watched Luongo go through that. I know him a little bit, like dating back to the Panthers days, and we talk goaltending, usually once a year, have a long conversation about goaltending for Clarkie's old magazine. And so I'd seen some of the humor,
yeah,
but it was never exposed in the media until the Twitter account. Like, how much do you think that was a game changer? Obviously for him personally, he's talked about it. Do you think other guys around the league took note? Like, hey, look, this works. It's an outlet. We don't have to be judged strictly on how we interact post game. It's okay to have a little fun with it.
Yeah, no, Lou's a perfect example of it, in that respect. And, knowing it, you see that stuff behind the doors. But I guarantee you in 09, 10, there wasn't a lot of joking around in Lou's press conferences. When we were sitting there listening to him after games, it was, everyone was on him. Why aren't they winning? Why didn't we win in the playoffs? That kind of stuff. And nowadays, I think he's realized, when he went back to Florida to have fun with it and show some personality. And it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're not caring as a goaltender. So, certainly, if guys aren't being advised that way, which I'm sure they are, Carter Hart and these guys, I'm sure they are being advised that way. But if they're not, Lou's a great example of that back end of his career and how he changed and how the media, changed perception, allowed him to get a few more freebies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that even around then, when you hear like the playoff, there were times where he tried to be self-deprecating and make fun of things, and he was absolutely roasted for it in the local media. Yeah, just hammered for how can you make a joke at a time like this?
That's right. And that's what those big media markets, that's what it was like then. And it was hard to, it would always get misconstrued.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, I want to rewind a little bit. You mentioned Tuukka.
Yeah.
How's that that relationship and watching him as part of the media side, and I'm assuming getting to know him a little bit around the locker rooms on the media side, a guy you were traded for, a guy we still hear a lot about that trade. To me, he's kind of like Carey. Like, I love his ability to let things roll off him. It doesn't mean he doesn't care, but much like Price in Montreal, when things were going well, he was described as cool and calm. And early in his career, when things didn't go well, oh, he's not trying hard enough. It's like, hey, it's the same guy doing the same things. How much have you watched that with Tuukka, and what's it like, now building this relationship on an analyst side with the guy you were traded for?
Yeah, so certainly, again, when it comes like the cool and calm when everything's going well, and not caring, it's it just doesn't, like you said, it's the same thing. It's the same guy, and unfortunately, that's the way they are perceived at times. I think the more success you have, the more that goes away. But the reality is that he shouldn't have to go to Game 7 to prove that. I think his 10 years prior, 12 years prior to that should answer those questions.
Yeah.
And then, obviously the trade, that's always going to be a trade that people talk about, and just be Toronto and Boston, the whole thing, Pogge being involved. There's a lot of history to that. So, I've known Tuukka a long time just from that trade, and I've been back in Boston every summer. So I skated with him and know him, and we actually live 6 minutes away from each other now. So we have mutual friends outside of hockey. My kids went to the same preschool at the same, that kind of stuff. So we see each other around. We'll grab a beer if we get a chance. And, he's just a great guy. He really is that a great person, a really nice guy, and a good guy to kind of hang out with. So, it just so happens that now I'm doing a little bit of TV here in Boston, and we cross paths, professionally for the first time. But we always, he's always great about it. And we can always kind of, it's a bit of a wink when we do talk, and, people recognize it a little bit more just because of the trade.
Okay. So Toronto, a couple years there, the spotlight of Toronto, Colorado, year in Vancouver, Dallas Stars, a lot of different voices for you over a short period of time from a goalie coaching standpoint. It's one of the things that I always wonder about, is when guys do move around in a short period of time, and it had full seasons in each stop, but with each new stop comes a new goalie coach, a new voice, new ideas, sometimes more forceful than others. Guys want to change your game, or guys have ideas about what they think work. Who were some of the voices that jump out to you over your career? Even in Boston, when you were there, top of my head, I'm assuming it was goalie Bob, but some of the different voices you had from a goalie coaching standpoint, and how your game evolved as a pro.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started out, here in Boston, not really having a goalie coach. I was Brian DeCord was here for a year, maybe year or two, and when I was in the minors. So I wasn't really day to day with him. He'd come down and work, and, as a minor league guy, you didn't get any love from anybody. So for him to come down was super, helpful. And I always respected him for coming down and helping the young guys. And then, I had goalie Bob his first year, was my last year. So he was, obviously a guy who played a long time, and, we never did anything really technical at that point. He was just a great guy to have there and talk to, and he listened, and he was just very calming. And then, to go from, and then I had Steve McEachin in Toronto, which he was in and out as well, not completely full-time yet, which is crazy for anyone to hear now, but we just didn't have full-time NHL goaltenders, even, a big organization like the Leafs. And Denver was the first place. I had Jeff Hackett, was very intense, very serious. And we worked, like work. And it was a lot of work. And then you've mentioned Clarkie already a few times. Clarkie was the best, NHL guy I had. We basically treated my whole year in Vancouver as goalie school. And that was the biggest progression I had made at any point in my entire career, probably over in a season. Just the things he brought to my attention, the things we worked on, just made me so much better than what I was when I went into Vancouver and before I left. And the reality, like, I wanted to stay in Vancouver forever. I loved it. Unfortunately, there was this pretty good prospect coming up that they didn't end up trading, Corey Schneider. So I had to move on, but I loved that year. The team was great. And like I said, Clarkie was awesome. Just made me
Sorry, I was just going to say, well, I am quite glad to hear that you didn't say you loved Vancouver and you had to leave because this guy just kept annoying you with questions about goaltending all the time.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to ask you, because the audience here is 100% goalies, so these are guys are going to get it. Are there any one or two little examples or anecdotes you can give us when you talk about the details and changing your game with Clarkie that year here in Vancouver? Because that's a pretty rave review you just gave.
So the biggest thing was to not try and be technical all the time for me. I was trying to make the perfect save on every play. With Clarkie, he got me into desperation mode, allowing myself to stretch out if I needed to. Don't try and push all the way over. And then a couple little, like when I talk about pushing, getting a stronger push by having my push leg tighter to my body. Worked on that over and over again. I'd kind of gotten sloppy having it, just off my body and not being able to drive into it as much. But the big thing was the desperation. I remember him telling me I had to turn into an alley cat, be dirty, be gritty. And we worked a lot of, 1-on-0, 2-on-2 plays down low where I'm just, diving and sliding and being athletic. And it paid off in games. I made quite a few saves in Vancouver that I never would have made prior to that, just reaching out and doing it in a smart way, getting my glove in the right position, getting it above the puck, getting my pad in the proper position and laying out the right way. So that was the big thing, is turning myself into an alley cat. And we did a lot of that work. And, the other thing, now that I'm just talking about it, was shoulder saves. I'd gotten out of, I was trying to catch everything and make saves rather than, moving shoulders into it short side. I remember making a few saves in games after the holidays, after the Christmas holidays, just because I'd worked on it a few years. I remember making them in games thinking, man, this is fantastic. Like I'm in a great spot with my game right now. So those were 2-3 big points that Clarkie and I worked on. And again, it all came from him and it made a big difference in my game. And I was able to carry all that to Dallas. And I had Mike Valley, was another great guy. And with Valley, we went back. He did a lot of hands work. I was there with Kari Lettinen. So we did a lot of finish work, a lot of hands, a lot of simple right in front, but it made a big difference in my game. Just getting back to basics, catching the puck, steering the puck with a blocker, that kind of stuff.
It's so funny to hear you talk about desperation with Clarkie, because I think a lot of people think of him as a quote unquote technical coach. So that's a fascinating anecdote. So now we get into after Dallas for a couple of years. You wind the career down by going overseas. Talk just quickly, and we'll let you go after this, but that decision to head over and keep playing, first in Italy and then in Sweden, what the experience was like? What led you to that decision? Just wanted to keep playing? What was that like?
Yeah, so I went to Europe during the lockout. I was in Finland in the first lockout, 05-06. It was my first time over there, and I loved it. My wife and I, we loved it over there. I loved the experience, and I had always said that I wanted to finish over there. I wanted to finish up in Europe if I had the chance. And I was getting older. I was 34. We had one kid, and then so I wanted us all to have that experience. I had a couple offers to go to the minors and be that third guy, but there's a little bit of burnout at that point too. Like you said, I bounced around a little, and when you're that backup guy and going, after playing a lot, early in my career, I was, it was a grind for me, and I was ready for something completely different. And I just wasn't. I guess the honest answer, I just wasn't ready to or willing to grind it out for 2 or 3 more years to maybe get 10 more games in the NHL. My gig had kind of run out, and I wanted to go over to Europe and have a good experience with my family. So went to Italy, which is, the opposite of grinding. It was a great experience. Lived downtown Milan and traveled in the mountains and just had a great experience. And then Sweden the last year was great hockey, and we had the Twins. So I needed to go to a place where we knew the doctors, and we had friends in Sweden at the time that helped us out. So it was just a perfect opportunity to finish up there and play competitive hockey for one last time. And I had a great time doing both of those places.
So over all those years and all, I'm going to bring it back to equipment real quick. What's your favorite setup of all time? Like, you were Coho earlier in your career.
Yeah.
Transition when that became Reebok. But is that when you look back at old setups, like which one would you put on the wall of the office?
No, it's definitely the co-host setup in Boston. That's I get a lot of love for that one. But that was my favorite setup, and I was pretty proud of being that one of the first guys in Reebok too. You know, it was myself and Lou and Giguere, I believe at the time.
Yeah,
there's probably someone else, maybe Turco. But we were the first guys to roll out the Reeboks. I remember rolling them out in Finland during that lockout and being, I was probably one of the only few guys in the world to have it. So I was pretty pumped to be a Reebok athlete. They're from Boston, so I could always go over and maybe get a free pair of running shoes and things like that. So the Reebok stuff was great, really cool too. But certainly the Coho 590s is the best setup when I look at pictures now.
Okay, perfect. Hey, Andrew, listen, this has been fascinating. We got, me, I probably could find 10 more questions that I'd love to ask, but I've already taken up more time than I promised I would. And I can't thank you enough for your time today. I know our listeners are going to love this, and we'll definitely make sure there's a part 2. Maybe next time you're in town in Vancouver, and we'll grab some lunch on me.
Awesome. You're on. Sounds great. Thanks for having me. And sorry I didn't bring up I never had to carry the clipboard. So fortunately for me, because if I had I would have been ranting like Ozzy was about that too.
All good. We'll find some things to rant about next time, buddy.
Beautiful. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
You got it.
He was great. I'm glad you guys brought up those old Coho sets because it was they were beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And when we start rattling off Coho and numbers and references to sets, it's great. And the other part is when he talked about being in a hotel and for a number of weeks carving your teeth in the National Hockey League and how isolating it could be. You think you're just up there, you're living the life, but yeah, teams, guys have families, and when they're at home and you're kind of just there. And no matter how many times they invite you over for dinner, it's just different. So I thought that was neat as well. Jordan Binnington is kind of a comparable to, not directly to Raycroft, but burst on the scene, took advantage of an opportunity. Binnington, obviously, a number of years older when he did it. But I'm really happy for Jordan and the start to his year, because there were still, even though he won a Stanley Cup and accomplished what he did, there were still those people that wondering, is he a flash in the pan? And not saying he's proven himself to be a lifelong NHL goaltender yet, but he started the year really, really well.
Yeah, and I think we should first start by saying I don't think none of those people were speaking on this podcast right now.
No, I didn't mean
definitely
that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, I think we were on record as
I would have mentioned you guys by name and called you out.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the case.
Hey, listen, one of the local hosts of the TSN Vancouver radio station that I do weekly hits on basically took that route. Jordan Binnington was on his hot streak early in January.
Oh.
I was happy to point out that I thought he was wrong, and that a lot of the things that I saw in Binnington's game as early as January last year looked very sustainable to me. And knowing, obviously the track record and the history and the changes he'd made, and talking to some of the coaches that had been a part of it in the minors and in the offseason, I really did think it was sustainable for him. And so I'm not surprised by this. What I wondered was whether the Blues would sag a little bit in terms of their commitment in front of him, because goaltending never exists in a vacuum. Team play matters. And there have been times where they have leaned heavily on him early in the season, but you're right, Darren. He's been really good. We certainly weren't among the ones asking questions, but consider them asked and answered through the first month of the season for sure.
Yeah, happy for him. It's an interesting road that he's taken and continues to thrive. And were you really that big of a pain in the ass when Raycroft was there?
I kind of still am, right? Like,
yeah,
I kind of wonder if the Canucks have to give out clauses, when
you sign here, you have to deal with this, we'll pay you this, but you have to deal with Woody.
Yeah, it's kind of it. Like, there's probably a clause in there that, like, you get bonus pay for if you're a goalie for having to answer my questions all the time.
We know some of them love it.
Some do. I'm not sure Jacob Markstrom's a big fan. to be perfectly honest. But I remember actually going out of my way. I think it was a text message or an email, just, wanted to make sure after Ryan Miller left the team and signed in Anaheim, just to say thanks, because he'd been so gracious with his time. And he was a guy who very passionate about the position, and I had a lot of questions over the 3 years he was here, and he was always good to answer them. And he put it this way: he said, at least you want to learn, like you're asking questions because you want to know the position and understand the position. And he appreciated that, but I'm not sure everybody does. I can be pretty freaking annoying. I joked with Fleury when Fleury came to Vegas, Darren, that was the line. I'm like, oh man, like, now you got to come see me like twice a year instead of when you're in the East, it was only once a year. He's like, these are the sacrifices I have to make.
It's worked out for him. I think maybe those appearances and those visits have done some added good. It's been positive. He's had a great year so far. The new real use for the term Allen key as Jake helps the St. Louis Blues from the bench to win a Stanley Cup. And when your margin of error is Game 7 on the road and you need 1 or 2 breaks along the way, maybe that was the key. And the scout goaltender in the video session, the razor's edge, very, very thin. As we thank Andrew Raycroft, Jake Allen, and of course, Adam Gans. For Kevin Woodley, David Hutchison, I'm Darren Millard. Thanks for listening to InGoal Radio, the podcast presented by Source for Sports Surrey, The Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com. Talk to you next time.